In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Good morning, beloved brothers and sisters. Today, I want to continue my talk on the four virtues. I've spoken of justice, I've spoken of courage. Now I want to speak of moderation and temperance. Beloved, common sense, common experience, natural wisdom says excesses are not good. Right? It's not good to eat too much. It does bad things to the body. And if you eat too little, it also does bad things. If a man doesn't sleep at all, he can do nothing. If he sleeps too much, he has no time to do anything. And so excess has never been seen as being good. Even the pagans saw this, and they understood this carefully. They said, Aristotle says these words, he says, "It is best to rise from life as from a banquet, neither thirsty nor drunken." So Aristotle says the best way is the middle way. This is the best path to take. He calls it the golden mean. And he says those who practice this will find tranquility, they'll find peace. And other Stoics would go on and they would say that from moderation comes many other useful things, including the essence of how to use time. Right? Many of the Stoics would say moderation involves knowing what is necessary and what is not, getting rid of what is unnecessary and doing what is necessary. And so you become efficient in your use of time. Finally, they would say self-control makes a man strong. Who can argue with this? The church doesn't disagree with this notion. But for the church, temperance, moderation, these are synonymous, go much deeper than this, much deeper, far deeper than this. St. Ambrose of Milan, this great father, who we will celebrate tomorrow, he says, "This is called temperance and moderation, wherein, before all else, tranquility of mind, the attainment of gentleness, the grace of moderation, regard for what is virtuous, and reflection on what is seemly are sought for." So what St. Ambrose is saying is that the man who exercises moderation, he becomes tranquil, but he is able to find what is necessary, what is virtuous, what is good. And I'll speak more, he'll go much further than this. But the man who is tied to the world, who is excessive in his earthly desires, he has no ability to see anything beyond the world itself. He cannot reflect upon anything else, and actually his soul is never tranquil, because when men root themselves to the earth is always changing, it's always in flux. Things come, things go, garments wear out, people's bodies wear out. And so the man who binds himself to the world is always upset, he's always unstable, he's always bouncing from misery to misery, because he can never find peace. Because in the world, there is no stability. There's just constant flux. And actually, the philosophers said that. The pre-Socratic said it. The Old Testament says it. The world is always turning. It's always in a season, from one season to the next. And so the man who binds himself to the world will never be tranquil. At the same time, if a man's gaze is only on earthly things, he will never see what is higher. He will never find the deeper things of God. And Christ himself says this. Right? The man who fasts, who is moderate, can speak the words of Christ. Right? When Satan comes to Christ, he says, "If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones should be made bread." Right? This is what he says. What does Christ say? He says, "It is written that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God." But the man who lives moderately can say this personally. He can say, "I know this. Because when I fast, when I set aside all of these excessive desires, then I see what my real desire is. My real desire is for God. It's for nothing else. I might have hunger, I might have all these other things, but none of them really satisfy me. They never do. I always pursue them, but they never satisfy me. But now that I have stripped myself of these other desires, I can see what I truly need. And my hunger truly is for God himself. It's for this long peace that I long for. The peace that comes only from what is eternal. And so the man that is moderate, the man that is temperate, he can find these truths. Other men cannot. St. Ambrose goes on. He says, "For we ought to be careful never to do anything rashly or carelessly, or anything at all for which we cannot give a reasonable ground." So he says we should do all things carefully with reason. Why does he say this? This is also connected to moderation. I'll explain why. Who do we worship? The Logos, the reason, wisdom, and power of God, who created all things, who brought all things from non-existence into being, by whom the Father created the ages. He is the wisdom of God. And in every single thing he has ever made, he has instantiated reason and purpose. God does nothing superfluously. Every blade of grass has a purpose in his mind. Every single one. Every single flower petal has a reason. Every single thing that God has made has a purpose, truly. Some purposes are higher than others. We can't mistake that. But every single thing has a purpose. Every single thing. We ought to be reason endowed as well. God has given us reason. He's given us his faculties, his abilities to follow him. And so God asks that we be like him, that we live reasonably, and that we do nothing that is careless or nothing that is without purpose, nothing that is random. There's no randomness in God. Why should there be so in us? We should be purposeful. And so the moderate man is actually the man who doesn't bind himself to the earth because he doesn't want to attach his ego to it. He wants to understand the purpose for everything. And so he labors with every single thing in this world, whether it's food, whether it's drink, whether it's sleep, whatever it may be. He seeks the divine purpose in it. He seeks, what is this purpose? How can I live in accordance with it? See, the egotist will take wine and he will drink it unto drunkenness. He doesn't seek its purpose. Right? What's the purpose of wine? To give joy to men's hearts. What is the deeper purpose? Think about when Christ drank wine. How did he drink it? He was always surrounded with other men. He was always in communion with them, drinking with them. There's that old adage, the man who drinks alone, he's not well. He's not in a good state. When Christ poured wine for others, he was in their presence. And so what does this turn into? This is an icon of paradise. See, a table and a bottle of wine could actually become an icon of paradise, so long as there's no sin. But see, if there's drunkenness, if there's egotism, this is an icon of hell. Right? This is just sheer desire, sheer passion. Right? So the wise man seeks, what is the use of all things? I don't want to misuse food. I want to use it only as it's intended to be, and to discover God in it. Right? Beauty fills this world. God gives beauty to all things, to flowers, to the ocean, to the sky, everything, to the planets. And yet beauty itself has massive purpose, even from the smallest little daisy all the way up to the moon. Why? Because all of it guides a man up to God, one step at a time, one movement. A man gazes at the earthly beauty and his soul's caught up in it, and he thinks about it and ponders it, and he gazes at yet higher beauty. He gazes at the ocean, he gazes at the Grand Canyon, at the mountains, at all that God has made, and he is caught up in this. But then he begins to ponder beauty itself, and he begins to realize beauty is even higher. There's even higher things than this. And he begins to think about virtues, and he realizes this is the ultimate beauty. This is the ultimate glory. But as he climbs the summit of the virtues, where does he go? He comes to this. He comes to him. And he begins to ponder him. And once he begins to ponder this, he's caught up to heaven. See, beauty guides man to God. St. Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain says beauty does not have value in and of itself. It has value only because it brings us to God. Right? And that is where all things guide us. Every single thing is made by him. And every single thing has a purpose, and his purpose is our salvation. Every single thing moves man to God. When we live in the modern world, we think, oh, I come to church and God is here, but when I go to the supermarket, he is not there. No, brother, he's there as well. Every single thing he has made. So every single thing must be used in accordance with his purpose, with his desire. So the work of those who worship Christ, who worship the Logos, is to seek the reason in all things, and to live in accordance with it. And all things work unto his glory. So if we eat, we should eat unto his glory, sharing it with our brothers. We should drink unto his glory. We should sleep unto his glory. We should do all things unto his glory, knowing the purpose for what it is made for and to fulfill it. Not unto excess, not unto rejection, but unto his purpose, unto his satisfaction. Apart from God, nothing has any meaning at all. So therefore, we cannot use anything apart from him. This is what moderation means. Moderation means to use all things as they were intended. Not more, not less, but as they were intended. Without passion. To take joy, yes, but all joy also brings us to God, who is the fountain of all joy. So when we take joy in something in and of itself, this is dangerous because this thing may have no long lasting value. This earthly thing that we look to will not last forever. So can we root our joy in it? We cannot. And see, as a man rises from layer to layer, from meaning to meaning, from purpose to purpose, he climbs higher. He goes from truth to truth, from light to light. And as he ascends higher and higher, as the saints did, he reaches a point in which the light that shines upon him in heaven is so bright that he can no longer see anymore, because it is so bright. The meaning that God gives is so great that it's beyond anything that men can understand. And in this light, the fathers call it divine darkness, not because it's dark, but because the light is so bright it fades everything out. And a man stands in this sheer super-rationality before God, the purpose of all purposes beyond purposes, and we are led up to it. Hell, on the other hand, is also dark, but it's a different kind of darkness. It's a darkness of ignorance, of vanity, of futility, of foolishness, of superfluousness, of insanity, of purposeless nonsense. That's what hell is. All nonsense goes to this place and dwells there. because this is where there's an absence of purpose. And so the man who binds himself to God's purposes and uses them in harmony with nature, he will find harmony in the next life. But the man who's disharmonious in this life, who uses things in and of themselves for their own sake, he will have trouble because he's bound his heart to what is passing, to what is transitory. And here's the problem. If a man binds his heart to what is transitory, how will he survive when he goes into eternity? Because if he has bound his eternal soul to what has no lasting value, how will his eternal soul navigate an eternity where these things are absent? So if a man says, my life is for this world, he errs gravely, because he cannot take this world with him. What does Christ say? Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Ah, these are the words by which we live, right? That's what he said to Satan. Man lives by these words, these purposes, these truths. So if we bind ourselves to God's truths and we live in harmony with them, then we will have this for all eternity, and we will be in peace. St. Nicholas was like this, beloved. St. Nicholas was the ultimate rational man, because he understood the world. He understood what it was. He saw everything for what it is, for how God made it. He used food for what it was used for. He used clothing for what it was used for. He didn't attach himself to anything. He took joy in all the things God gave, but his joy rebounded up to God, because God is the source of all things. St. Nicholas took everything as the cue that will lead a man to God, and that's how he tried to guide everyone else. Right? He lived in total moderation, seeking purpose in all things. Even when he was a baby, he would not nurse on Wednesdays and Fridays by God's grace. So even he was born with the kind of temperance that God gave to him. And he continued to nurture this through his own freedom. Beloved, we should be like St. Nicholas. We should live lives that are filled with purpose, in which every single thing in this world has a divine stamp upon it. Every single thing has a purpose Christ has given to it. And everything we should do should be the search for this purpose and the fulfillment of it, in ourselves, in other men, and in all the things that we use, to God's glory. We should be like St. Gregory Palamas, who ascends from light to light to light, from truth to truth to truth. And as he lay dying, St. Gregory Palamas spoke these words to those who were gathered around him, or rather, he probably spoke them to the angels. For those who were gathered around him heard him say, higher, higher towards the light. Because that was his whole life. His life was an ascent towards truth. From one thing to the next thing to the next thing. He rose all the way to paradise. May it be so with us. Amen.